In this world, there's these assassins and they have their own rules. And who's making up these rules? Even in the film at one point, it's like, you can't do that. It's against the rules. I'm thinking, who makes up these rules? Like,
And then
what?
who agrees on them,
Yeah, yeah.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures all.
All right, Steve, so this week we are looking at a new Korean thriller called The Old Woman and the Knight. So this is directed by Kyu-dong, who's actually been around for quite a while. But I think the most notable thing about is that it stars sort of the veteran actress Lee Hye-young, who's been around since the 80s. And she plays sort of an aging woman in her 60s who is a deadly assassin. And the film essentially follows her in her current iteration and the challenges she faces as part of sort of an agency of assassins and people challenging her for her position and wanting to sort of join her. But also, obviously, over time, we get the backstory of how she came to be in this very, very strange vocation. So where to begin with this one, Steve?
Yeah, James, I one of the things I appreciate doing this show with you is the introduction I have to a lot of Asian films that I traditionally have not. I was even going to ask you about Kyu-dong and what he's done before, and when you asked if we could review this, I thought, we haven't done a Korean film in a while, and I was really looking forward to it. And to be fair, I enjoyed this film. It was a fun couple hours. I never felt for a minute like, oh, this is, well, when is this going to be over? And I got a bit of my John Wick fix. There's kind of this alternative reality world where assassin groups are operating under the radar of society. It's almost like Harry Potter, and we've got this wizardry world and the Muggles world, and in this world, there's these assassins, and they have their own rules. And who's making up these rules? Even in the film at one point, it's like, you can't do that. It's against the rules. I'm thinking, who makes up these rules? Like,
and then who agrees on them?
Yeah. Where's the Constitution on this? But I think we're meant to kind of lay all that stuff at the doorstep when we enter films like this and give it at least a sense we're willing to accept what it gives us. The challenge I had, though, and this is not a huge issue. I mean, obviously, I think it's am I saying this right? Lee Hye-young?
Yeah, sure. That's good enough.
Yeah, Lee Hye-young. She does a wonderful job in this. But the challenge you have is having that Nikita-like figure. We've been introduced to the female assassin a number of times, and
Sure.
Alias and these things. And it's always a young, spry woman. And it's already a challenge anytime a 75 kilo woman is flipping a 120 kilo guy around. Okay, and we're willing to, I suppose in alternate reality world, this little 5'6" girl can do this. But then you're going to tell me now a 65-year-old 5'6" woman could do this. It really starts to strain credulity and credulity. Help me with that. Credulity?
Yeah, credulity. Yeah. Credibility or whatever. Yeah.
Credibility. And so this is just one of the things I went into this struggling with. Your thoughts?
Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, this is the kind of film that Korea does really well, and they do a lot of these kind of movies, these very slick.
There's a lot of knives in the heads that happen really fast,
Yes, yes. It's a lot of very slick, noirish sort of crime thrillers, set on, beautifully lit nighttime deserted streets with snow and what have you. This is the aesthetic of this movie is something that it's kind of the backbone of a lot of Korean genre cinema over the last sort of 20 years. It's very, very polished, very well put together package before you even get into sort of the nuts and bolts of, does the story work or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, a lot of Asian cinema, there is this sort of long running notion of sort of the lone female assassin, whether, if you look at old like Chinese kung fu movies or you look at Japanese revenge movies, just because it is, ironically, it's because it is sort of a twist on the norm, in a very male dominated society, that there is this sort of inherently appealing idea of, well, what if it was a woman? And that has just become almost kind of cliche unto itself because it's been
Right.
done. It's been done so,
So
many
much.
times,
Yeah.
right? But it's been done so many times because it works, because it is still, an interesting
Well,
angle.
there's something about the sexy assassin, and
Sure.
particularly a female assassin can worm their way into situations a male can't. And that's what Jennifer Gardner did with Alias. I mean, you throw her in lingerie, and she's in some Russian oligarch's bedroom in 5 seconds, assassinating him. But
Yes.
that's one of the tools in her trade. The problem with this one is she doesn't. At 65 years old, that tool's out the window.
Okay, well, we'll get to that, but I think
Okay. Yeah.
that absolutely is, what at the very core of this. It's like I'm attracted to her, but she's incredibly dangerous. It's
Yeah.
quite literally the Black Widow,
Yeah.
right? It's like I don't know whether to fall in love with her or be scared of her, and I think that is just particularly for a male audience. Let's be honest,
Yeah.
an incredibly attractive sensibility. It's like, oh, dangerous.
Oh, believe me,
It's the femme fatale.
we've talked before of you're aware of Harry Harrison's the Slippery Stainless Steel Rat books.
I just picked one up. Yeah.
Oh, in the very first book. I mean, I've been reading these since I was in high school. I think it's in the very first book when Slippery Jim DeGriz has to go against this top assassin, and is it Angelina? I think it's Angelia, who later becomes his wife.
Mm.
He's the top guy. She completely misdirects him and pretty much kills him. He spends 2 months in a hospital. When he finally comes out of a coma 2 months later, the only thing on his mind is, I'm in love with her and I must marry her.
I mean, men are very simple and stupid creatures. Let's just get that. But I mean, going right back to like sort of the film noir of the 30s and 40s. The femme fatale. The beautiful, dangerous woman who your protagonist gets involved with, and then she's the one that's gonna screw you over. Whether she's actually going to murder you or rob you blind or frame you for her husband's killing or whatever it is. This is an archetype that has always been incredibly attractive, and that continues to this day. With the slight twist here being that she's an older woman, and therefore, your defenses are down even further because she's so unassuming. She definitely dresses the part, in the big overcoat and the woolen hat and whatever.
Yeah.
She's playing up to the little old defenseless granny kind of image. But
it also helps though for the stunt double who has to do all those.
Okay, that's yes, sure, but you're being very cynical now. But I mean, Lee Hye-young, that's not to say that she's still an unattractive woman by any stretch. She's in a
Nope.
very glamorous, very elegant kind of woman.
Yeah.
Just the fact that she's slightly older, I think, is kind of the twist, the little sprinkling of originality in this particular film. But we've seen that a lot. I think more and more you're seeing sort of there's been a real push in film globally lately for like respect the older woman.
Yeah.
You're seeing a lot more sort of older women in more erotic, sexually charged movies as well. You're seeing the likes of Nicole Kidman and Angelina Jolie and whomever do sort of slightly racier material as well. They're like, I've still got it, so I'm going to follow Demi Moore. Look at The Substance, something like that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Even though that's a movie that addresses the notion of I wish I looked younger. The whole irony of it is Demi Moore looks fantastic at 64 or whatever, even if she doesn't believe it herself. So here you've got that at the center of this movie, and that adds a real sort of extra dynamic to it. But what it comes with more than anything else is the character's baggage. It's like, how did a woman, in her 60s come to be like this and be so good at it that she's still top of her game in the 60s? And I think that's where the film sort of works, is where she's going up against all of these much younger, stronger men. And she's still managing to kind of hold her own. There's a real sort of inherent tragedy to the character when you meet her, because you're like, oh, who would want to live like this? And very quickly we see that she has she literally sort of fell into the doorway of
Yeah.
a guy who does this for a living,
Right.
and he took her under his wing and raised her to be the killer. And that's so often the female assassin's origin story, isn't it? It's just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh well, I was going nowhere, I was on death's door. Look at Nikita. I mean, it's very much like that.
Yeah.
I was a drug-addled bank, sort of a thief and cop killer, and
Yeah.
this
And
was
then
my only way out.
and the dog is always the gateway drug to humanity, back to humanity. It's
Yes.
always the dog. I mean, even with not that Mad Max was an assassin, but he's the loner. He's got the dog. You got to have
Right.
John Wick. You've got to have the dog, and she's got the dog, and it's the gateway drug that introduces her back to her feelings, her goodness, and her humanity.
Well, that's where the John Wick, you mentioned that right off the bat. That was the great sort of trigger to the whole John Wick franchise, isn't it? Is that
Yeah,
they break
the
into his
dog.
house and kill his dog, and
Given to him by his wife.
and you were saying that this had sort of John Wick vibes, and yeah, it totally does. But that's been one of those beautifully reciprocal relationships over the decades as well. If you look at we've talked previously about sort of westerns and samurai movies and how they kind of have fed each other almost like they're in competition with one another, albeit full of mutual admiration over the years. Well, obviously John Wick has its roots in the Matrix, which had its roots in Hong Kong martial arts movies and anime and things like that. And so constantly it's gone back and forth, and particularly I think Korean cinema, just because it has that sort of inherently sort of slick noirish sensibility that the John Wick franchise also uses. They've been going back and forth with each other, constantly sort of informing and influencing one another.
They have a symbiotic relationship.
There you go. Yeah. They're feeding off each other, and it's great. It's great. So I mean, with the woman with the knife, you watch it and you're like, okay, yeah, I know where this movie is going.
Sure.
I know exactly.
Even the twists are kind of just. You know what's going to happen. There's no moment that you go, oh my God, I didn't see that coming. It's like every twist is so set up in advance that that it's and that's not even a huge criticism. I almost feel, James, like I'm the bit of the more harder critique on this, and you're the defense lawyer. What are your thoughts on this film from a criticism standpoint?
I think this is a polished, surfaceable example of one of these films, of which there are hundreds. Quite frankly, I mean, what this movie really did do for me, if I'm completely honest, is it now makes me want to go watch more Lee Hye-young movies. Right. Because I think she is great. She's a real sort of screen presence. She does even in her 60s have this sort of magnetic and innately kind of glamorous allure to her. And you look back, and she's, like I said, she's been working for decades, in theatre, in TV, but also in film. In recent years, she's worked a lot with Hong Sang-soo, who I must be honest, he's a very prolific filmmaker. He's a bit like Woody Allen, in as much as he makes a lot of movies. Like every year he makes at least one movies, and they're all quite similar. They're all like sort of on similar subjects with similar kinds of characters. He often works with Kim Min-hee, who is his sort of muse and partner. But Lee Hye-young has clearly been in a few of his more recent movies, and I must admit Hong Sang-soo isn't really to my taste. And so I've seen enough of his films to understand who he is, but I don't race to go see the new Hong Sang-soo movie every year that one comes out. So I don't think I've actually seen any of the ones that she's been in. She's been in like 3 or 4 over the last 5 years or so. And I must confess, I don't think I've seen any of those. More interesting, if I look way back in her back catalogue, back in the 80s, there are a couple of movies that I'm like, oh, I have a copy of that, but I haven't got to it yet. Things like North Korean Partisan in South Korea, which from 1990, which is, I know, a kind of very loaded sort of wartime drama kind of thing set between North Korea and South Korea, which I may now circle round to sooner than I would have done otherwise. Another one that has been on my radar the whole time is No Blood, No Tears from 2002, which is an early Ryu Seung-wan movie. Now, Ryu Seung-wan is a big filmmaker. He's working today. I, the Executioner was his most recent movie. He did Veteran. He did one of my all-time favorite Korean movies, which is called Crying Fist, which is a boxing drama from 2005, I want to say, with Choi Min-sik in it, who is the star of Old Boy.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that is a movie I would love to talk to you about.
Well, you mentioned 2002. Haven't you brought that year up before in Korean cinema? Isn't there like some vortex of great Korean cinema?
I mean, this is right at the birth of like the new golden era of Korea. 2003 is like the golden year.
Okay, maybe it's 2003. I knew right in there is the sweet spot that you've brought up before.
For some kind of fluke, just 2003. I think maybe there had just been a sort of a string of back-to-back box office hits in like the preceding years. Films like Shiri and JSA and whatever had come up, and so suddenly all the investors are like, okay, you can make movies here, and everybody just got funded to make their dream script that year. I don't know what happened, but yeah, No Blood, No Tears is definitely one that I've been meaning to get to for a long time. The cast is really good. It's got Jeon Do-hyun in it, who we have watched because she did a movie a bit like this one called Kill Bok-soon.
Yes,
remember like a year or two ago?
Yeah,
which again is like an older female
very
assassin.
Very similar.
Right. And she's one of the biggest stars. She's a little bit younger, but she's one of the biggest stars in Korea at the moment. And so that's what I mean, where I'm saying, like, so much of this does all tie together. There are so many kind of films like this, but that's not necessarily to say that this movie is without merit. It's just that it's more, for me, it's more interesting to look at it within its place in the industry rather than as hold it aloft as a masterpiece of cinema on its own. You see,
well, I don't have the wide berth of films that you do, Korean films.
I'm working on it, Steve. We're getting there.
So the movie clocks in at 2 hours, and I said what I said previously because I don't want to sound like, okay, this is what I like, but Korean audiences like this, so just shut up, Steve. But I could have taken 10 minutes less of just never-ending knives in the head and just walking through 10 people. I obviously good choreographed fights are good. I can enjoy them as much as anyone else, but after a point, it becomes ho-hum. It's like, how many knives to the head can I watch? I would have liked they swapped out 10 minutes of fighting for 10 minutes of backstory of all the little things she did to become an assassin. Because there's a couple brief scenes where like she's with the mentor and she's much younger, and he hit her or throw something at her at the table, and she deflects it. And he goes, never. They'll know you're a pro if you demonstrate your reflexes like that. Better to take a stitch or two than to reveal your skill level. It's like, that's what I want more of. That moment. Give me some more of that. Give me more Miyagi and Daniel-san.
More wax on, wax off.
Yeah. I mean, maybe not in that, but more in the context of which I just described. I find that fun, and it helps us understand some of my earlier criticisms. Because if I don't understand how a 65-year-old woman who's probably 70 kilos can throw these guys around. But if I get obviously there's still going to be an element where you got to just suspend all reality. But at least there is a rationale behind it, that I've seen this progression, rather than, oh, this woman just came off the street and suddenly she can just do all this stuff and there's no magic involved. There's no magic ring. She's 65 years old and she can do this. And it's like, I don't think so.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair, actually, because I think it's 123 minutes, and it does feel, for me, it does feel it runs a little long. And I think that's just because, there's a lack of depth to it, if we're completely honest. And more backstory from her, maybe even more from the other guy, because he is supposed to just be sort of emblematic of sort of the next generation and just sort of the kind of typical male adversary that she's facing in this profession, but also that Korean movies like this love to have as the central antagonist. It's always a young, good-looking, smartly put together guy who's a bit of a sociopath.
But the problem is nearly every male character is portrayed by a young Korean pretty boy. It's like
Yeah.
there's no differentiation at all. It would have been great. Okay, if we have the antagonist and the main, the polar opposite to her, the kid that's coming after her and has the relationship. Okay, yeah, he's the young up and coming, and he can be the pretty boy. But the guy who's the head of the syndicate that she's part of, he's a pretty boy that looks just like this guy. The only reason
Yeah.
I can tell the difference is their hairstyles are a little different.
And then
And
the
I'm
guy
thinking,
who raised her is kind of looks
kind
the
of the
same
same.
as well.
Well, I was going to say sometimes there's a flashback, and the only reason I know it's a flashback is because she's changed, not because of him. Because I'm thinking, which Korean pretty boy is this one now? Whereas you think if he's going to be the head of the syndicate, maybe not 65, but it'd be a 45, 50-year-old debonair Korean man with some gravitas. I found that the leader of their group is like, do we have a guy that would actually run this organization, or do we put another 25-year-old kid who looks good?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. This movie reminded me a lot of the movie that came out probably about 10 years ago now called The Villainess,
Mhm.
which is another Korean movie which borrows a lot from Nikita. And it's not. I didn't love that movie, but it has some really great standout action set pieces,
Right.
which you then saw a lot of films borrow. There's a sequence in, I think it's John Wick 2 or 3, where they're fighting each other and they're all both on motorbikes
Mhm.
speeding down the highway that's lifted straight out of The Villainess. And that film focuses a lot more on the relationship between her and her handler, because if I remember rightly, she is kind of kidnapped, and it's by like North Korean insurgents or whatever, and that's who she's trained up by. And that relationship, and he's played by Shin Hye-young, who's like a great actor, and that's a kind of slightly more interesting relationship there. This one I felt, while it's great, and I think she is great, it's well put together. It's not great. It's well put together, and
Sure.
she's great in the role.
Yeah.
What it lacked is, a bit more character backstory and some real standout action set pieces.
Mhm.
There's no scene that I will point to in this movie and go, now that's a spectacular
Yeah.
action moment or suspenseful sequence or whatever. It knows
It's pretty generic. The fights
it is
they're very generic. Yeah.
it's generic, it's serviceable, it comfortably sits in its lane,
Yeah.
and I wish it had dared to go a little bit further.
Right. No, I couldn't agree more. And I also felt too, maybe it's because I'm getting older, but some of the edit cuts are so fast
Yeah.
that I'm always thinking, can they just stay on a scene for another 3 seconds? It's just jumping around like I need to be on some kind of drug or to stay up with the constant switch. Again, whenever she's kind of having like a dialogue with Dr. Kong, I find that more interesting as she's revealing more of herself. I'm getting layers to who this character is, because at the end of the day, she's your star. She's the
Yeah.
one person with gravitas in this whole film. So lean into that. Like when they do that, this is when the film shines. And when they stray from that, that's when you start looking at your watch.
Absolutely. I mean, remains a sort of frustratingly enigmatic character throughout, and would have benefited a lot more from being more of a character piece and trying to perhaps emulate the other bigger, stronger movies from this genre slightly less. Because I think ultimately it never steps out of the shadow of those other movies.
Well, the Korean actors better than I do. Is there a creative decision where they just say, "Listen, we could hire a 50-some-year-old Korean man to play this role, but we will get this demographic to come watch this movie if we put the 25-year-old, you know, up and coming star that's on the cover of the teen magazine." I don't know, but it seems like there's an element. If that's not the decision that they made, it at least comes across like that was a consideration.
Yeah, no, it's a weird little phenomenon in Korean thrillers like this of the last sort of 10, certainly of the last like 10 years or so, is that the bad guy is always just this younger, sort of sociopathic, emotionally detached guy who is just, incredibly well put together, normally incredibly well dressed, and is just completely outrageously violent and
Yeah.
proficient. It's just the sort of stock character now. I'm not sure exactly where it originated from, but it's an opportunity for these young pretty boys to do something a little different,
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
breakaway from the romantic leading roles they might otherwise play. But it's become a huge cliche in the industry, and it's getting kind of boring. I will admit it.
Sure. One other point I wanted to make is being a Korean film and with Korea's tack towards evangelical Christianity, I couldn't help but notice, as the resident Christian and faith-based man on our team here, that they end with with Lee Hye-young's character going after her final victim, like she's going to stay in the game, and of course it is a mega church pastor who is sexually abusing the believers. And damn, if what she has to do to him, people have what they've got to do. She's got to blind him and castrate him. I'm like, crikey, that's another thing. Being an American, the Koreans are willing to go to 11 with a lot of their violence and their both real violence and implied violence. Whereas, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, that's a little.
It's one of those little cultural peccadillos where the tolerance for violence is very, very high. Tolerance for sort of sexuality on screen is very low and very judgmental. Particularly sort of female fashion. No cleavage, cover the shoulders, but then you can show your entire leg. You can wear the tiniest pair of shorts and show off all your legs. It's a very weird sort of double standard, but it's just the way that it leans.
Well, I wonder if America in its evangelical background and Korea in its developing evangelical background. I remember, I think I told you years ago, I saw who was in the cooler with Alec Baldwin and Maria Bello, William H. Macy. William H. Macy. Yeah. I saw him at the Denver International Film Festival a few years ago, and he was saying how in America's society, because of its religious, I think he said because of the religious background or the puritanical roots, we have a tremendous acceptance of violence, but very low tolerance for sex. He said in making this movie, we could not show Maria Bello anything but topless. Like God, and then he said something like, God forbid that we see a pube. But we can have Alec Baldwin bust the kneecaps of somebody or hit, granted the woman turned out to not be pregnant, but we think that he's going to bash a pregnant woman's stomach with a lead pipe. And that's okay, but not Maria Bella's, And I'm just wondering if there's a similarity in puritanical evangelical acceptance for violence, high acceptance for violence, low acceptance for sex.
Yeah. The short answer is yes. It's kind of exactly the same, and it is, I think, partly the influence of these mega churches, and just a sort of a sort of a conservatism paired with very high stress social environments, and obviously living in Korea, you're on the precipice of war at any given moment, and obviously they've had a very tumultuous history. Yeah. So they're used to violence in a way that they're not used to or condone sort of overt sexuality in the same way. It's one of these very sort of standout signifiers of Korean culture that you see represented on screen time and again.
So James, what's going to be our unit of measurement for The Woman and the Knife?
Well, I think it's got to be the kind of the hair. Is it a chopstick or a knitting needle or whatever?
Yeah,
her weapon of choice.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I think yes, this movie is very generic and it doesn't really push the envelope. It doesn't really explore much, but it's a perfectly serviceable entry in this canon, and particularly Lee Hye-young is great in it, and it has inspired me to go and seek out some more of her stuff. So I'm going to give it a rock solid 3. 3 sharpened chopsticks to the ear. Yeah, because it does the job.
I'm tacking the same way. I was going to give it 2.5, but because of Lee Hye-young's the gravitas she does bring, I just felt that she's worth that extra half. And if they'd leaned more into her story, we would have given it another half to a full star. Unfortunately, they didn't do that, but I would like to see more films by her because she definitely has a screen presence that I'd like to see again.
Absolutely, she sure does. Yeah, I mean that's it for me. In the comments there, let me know if you've seen this, if you've seen any more movies by Lee Hye-young. What's good? What should we check out? Please no Hong Sang-soo movies though; they're just not for me. But anything else, and any other sort of female-fronted revenge movies that you recommend? We may have seen them. Lady Vengeance, for example, of course, we've seen that. But let us know.
Yeah, I'm homesick this afternoon, so I'm looking for recommendations. I'm going to be on the couch and I'm going to watch a movie. Till next episode, cheers, everybody.
Bye bye.
Cool.
I'm gonna go.
You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be. You're